If you ever find your mind running in circles, then this episode is for you. Tonight, we are diving into the shadow side of the air element, looking at those limiting beliefs, anxious forecasting, mind loops, or those inaccurate thoughts that somehow you think are true. So, I'm going to be walking you through a 3-step, very simple process that you can use when you find yourself slipping into that negative loop or those negative limiting beliefs, so that it can help you better choose the next more accurate thought. So, merry meet. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. Tonight we're here talking about how to work with the air element, but this is about the shadow side of the air element, especially our limiting thoughts and our limiting beliefs. So, merry meet. If you're here with us live, say hi in the chat. Let us know that you are here. As always, we'll have a Q&A at the end. I'll be watching the chat as we go, so you can leave your questions and comments there. So I just wanted to say before we get going, this is actually part 2 of a kind of 2-part series, though you do not have to have seen the first episode in the series in order to benefit from tonight. So in part 1, we talked about correspondences and practices connected to the air element, and now we're going to be talking about the shadow side. So originally, I thought this would all be one episode, but there was way too much information, so it felt better to split it halfway. And tonight we're going to be talking about the shadow side. So a lot to talk about. We're going to first start by kind of explaining what the shadow side of the air element looks like. Every element has a shadow side, and so like there will be a certain things that you can notice in yourself, whether it's in your body, your mind, or your emotions, that can help to tell you that one or more elements are out of balance. And so tonight, this is about, well, what happens when air has become out of balance? So it'll affect more than just the physical. When air is out of balance, it's going to affect our thoughts. So let us know in the chat, how does the shadow side of the air element show up for you? Does it show up as overthinking? Does it show up as communication issues? Does it show up as mental fog or scattered focus, limiting beliefs? What is kind of your sign that your air element is out of alignment for you? So let us know in the chat, and you can let us know as we are going. Then I am going to dive in, and we are going to talk about what this is really going to mean for us. So since the air element is the element that's most connected to our mind and connected to our language, even our inner language, that is where we're going to start to see the air element sometimes going sideways for us. So when the air element is out of balance, it can show up as repetitive thoughts for people. And the trouble is, because the air element moves so quickly, sometimes we're already pretty far into these negative thoughts or these kind of looped patterns before we even realize something is amiss. So it can show up as limiting beliefs. Now, these can be limiting beliefs that we develop in the moment, or these can be limiting beliefs that we have carried for quite some time. They can also show up as, like I mentioned before, kind of issues with our communication. We're going to not really be talking as much about that tonight, more about the limiting beliefs, but just know there are many ways that kind of that shadow side or that sideways kind of side of the air element can show up. So tonight's episode and how we shift our negative thoughts and our limiting beliefs isn't just about thinking positively. So if that's something that you've tried in the past and that didn't work, don't worry. That's not what we're talking about tonight. We're not talking about just think positive, because while that can work for some people in some instances, I don't think it's a good fix, because it's just putting a band-aid on the surface. So maybe we can think positively for a little bit of time, and then before we know it, we're back into the limiting thoughts and the limiting beliefs. So what we're going to talk about tonight is a process that you can use. It's very simple, and you can use it every time, and you can use it in the moment, and it will kind of help you in that moment, and it will continue to help you the more that you use it. So like I said, it's not just about thinking positively. It's about noticing the pattern that you're in when you're in it, which can be hard sometimes. So it's really gonna require us to sort of stop, notice the pattern that we're in. Understanding what that pattern is trying to do, that's the shadow work of it. And then choosing something that will be more accurate for us. And it's not something that's meant to lie to us or paint a prettier picture of something. It's just a more accurate thought that is going to serve us better. So we're going to first start by what is a limiting belief. For those who don't know kind of that language, a limiting belief is a conclusion that the nervous system is going to treat as a fact. So we can have these limiting beliefs that sort of loop in our mind. These are kind of the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And they may come from many, many places. So they may be coming from far in the past, they can come from past lives. Even they can often come from kind of the beginning of our lives in this incarnation, things that our parents said to us, or other people that were caregivers, or people who we looked up to. Things that they said to us then become ingrained, and they can start to become limiting beliefs. But the problem with it, and what makes it so limiting, is that the nervous system takes it to be true. So when we're repeating it over and over and over, our nervous system is believing that thought, and then it reinforces it for us, and it can put us into kind of fight or flight reactions in our body, tightening of shoulders, headaches, tightening of the throat so we can't speak. And so then it can go into our physical body. Now, usually underneath a limiting belief of some kind, there's usually some kind of a fear. Now, we don't necessarily need to get all the way down to the earliest origins of these thoughts in order to work with them, as you'll see in the step-by-step process we're going to talk about tonight. But in your continued and long-term shadow work, it's always useful for you to contemplate, where do my most limiting beliefs come from? Where do the stories that I tell myself about myself come from? And that can give you some insight, and then in addition to what we're going to do tonight. So here are some examples of some limiting beliefs, and feel free in the chat. I'm going to go to the chat in just a moment, but feel free in the chat to also let us know what are some limiting beliefs that have plagued you. Maybe ones that you've experienced in the past, or maybe ones that you continue to experience. So here's a few examples, and this is one that I definitely resonate with. So if I rest, I will fall behind. I mean, it was literally in my mind last night as I stayed up way too late doing work. But there's kind of this idea, if I rest, if I lie down, if I slow down, if I stop, then I'm just going to fall behind, and then that will get worse and worse and worse. Here's another example of a limiting thought or belief. So if I say what I need, people will leave me, right? And so that can be a big one for many people, and it can keep them stuck and keep them from saying the things that they need to say or speaking their truth, because they're so afraid that people will leave if they do. If I am not perfect, or if this isn't perfect, or whatever I'm working on isn't perfect, then I will be judged. Or we can insert many things here, or people will leave, or things will fall apart, or you can insert your own language here. So a limiting belief is it's a sentence that your mind will repeat over and over. It repeats it automatically, so it's just there. And one of the things that we didn't talk about in the last episode, but I have talked about in a previous episode on the air element, is that some studies believe or have found that people can think up to 80,000 thoughts a day, which is a staggering amount of thoughts, right? But what was most revealing in this study was that the study found that most of what people were thinking was very negative. Either it was very negative, it was very repetitive. So that's kind of like the function of the limiting belief. It's like going to repeat itself over and over and over again. So you could have that one thought could repeat itself 100 times or more in that one day. And the study also found that these thoughts were mostly irrelevant. So they really weren't relevant to the situation anyway that the people were in. So something to take, some food for thought when you're really thinking about your thoughts. So the limiting belief is that sentence that you repeat automatically. You're not thinking about it. It's like a reflex. That's what can plague people so much. Is it's why people will often think that they are powerless to control it, is because it just happens to come automatically. But stick around till the end of tonight's episode, and I will tell you of a process that I think can eliminate most of your limiting beliefs, or at least give you a place to work on them rather than just kind of accept them and go about your life. Now, a limiting belief will also limit your growth. So to me, that's definitely a definition of the limiting belief. It is not in your best interest. It is not in your expansion. It's not like Jupiterian energy. It's more Saturnian, and it's more constricting. So let me pause for a moment, and we're going to get into kind of what the shadow side of the air element looks like. But I just want to go to the chat now and say hi to those who are joining us live. So Merry Meet to Cersei and Andrea and Tara, Merry Meet, Joanne, Merry Meet, and CB is here. And Cindy, Merry Meet, everybody. So I see some people putting some of their kind of shadow side of the air element in here. So Cersei says it can show up for her as overthinking. Andrea says limiting beliefs, overthinking, not speaking my truth. Definitely connected to the air element. CB says he would say more loops of thought and limiting beliefs. So a lot of people are kind of agreeing on how it shows up for them. Tara says overthinking, limiting beliefs, and social communication. So you can see a lot of patterns here, right? And so if you are, watching this back later on, you can also leave comments too. Let us know how it shows up for you. CB says, I've been learning about how a lot of my limiting beliefs and spirals of negative thoughts are habits. Yeah, and so that is the thing too, is that it's like I said, it's automatic, it's habitual. This is where we can feel powerless over it in the moment because it just comes in that moment. But there is absolutely things that we can do about it. Cindy said, my anxiety is so high right now. She said, I'm getting ready for a mastectomy, which is huge, right? She said, I'm having issues and I know it's the best result for me. But still, that doesn't negate the anxiety that you're feeling. And in that anxiety that we feel, we're going to talk a little bit later too, that a lot of what happens with the shadow side of the air element is that it's meant to be protective. So our anxiety can, at one root of it, be meant to be protective. Some of the thoughts, the limiting beliefs that we have, they are meant to be protective. That's why they're there. But they've often long outserved their purpose. So they might have protected us in like one moment, but then we sort of get stuck in the loop, and they're really not protecting us anymore. They're really hindering our growth, but they continue on despite that. And so it's common and it's natural and it's normal to be anxious about a big medical procedure, especially like a mastectomy, right? Because not only is it a big surgery, but it changes the way that we may feel about ourselves and our body. And even if we know it's for the best, like Cindy said, it's still it still can cause that anxiety. So hopefully something tonight will help a little bit. I also will say, for anxiety, when people are having anxiety about big medical procedures or like something big that's coming in the future, trying some deep and slow breath work can really help. Especially my go-to breath at the dentist's office is the longer exhale. So it really doesn't matter the count you do. You will count in, like, so let's say we inhale for a count of 4, and then we try to exhale for a count of 6 or 8. And you just kind of focus on the counting and you focus on that breathing, and it will slow the nervous system down. Will it take away all the anxiety over a medical procedure? Maybe not, but it might at least help ease it a little bit. So hopefully that will help. And hopefully what we're going to talk about coming up now, it will also help a little as well. And Merry Meet to Julia as well. Merry Meet, everybody. All right, so what does the shadow side of the air element look like? So there are several different kind of air shadow patterns that we can experience. And just because these are not the only ones, these tend to be some of the more common ones. But if there's something that I don't mention that's not on my list, and you feel like it is a shadow side of the air element, we'd love to hear about that as well in the chat. So, so the other thing I wanted to mention before I get into kind of this list of things is that you don't need to diagnose yourself with all of these things. You just need to notice which ones feel familiar. And when we go through lists like this, we're never doing this to make you feel more nervous or anxious. Just notice which ones do you resonate with, and that will help you tell a little bit more where you're at with the air energy. Is it more kind of moving into that more shadow side because you're imbalanced with the energy, or are you feeling more centered with it? So just notice which feel familiar to you. So catastrophizing, or we could also say anxious forecasting. So catastrophizing is when we take one kind of thing that's happening right now, and we immediately and sometimes it's not immediate, sometimes it can be over kind of time, but we move from where we are right here to far in the future or somewhere in the future where some terrible event has happened. So let me give you an example of like catastrophizing. This is one that I have had, a thought I've had is like, so right now, maybe I'm a little unhappy about things that are happening in the world and in the country in particular. And so if I'm catastrophizing, the next thing you know, I'm locked up in some prison somewhere for my free speech, right? So in the moment, I am not there, right? But the catastrophizing mind puts me into the future somewhere where something terrible has happened. So anxious forecasting to me is a little bit lighter. Like catastrophizing is where we go to like the biggest, worst thing that could happen. And the anxious forecasting is just where like we take our anxiety and, we're feeling the anxiety, and we allow that to help us sort of like forecast something bad that's going to happen in the future, or even deeper than that, like we take the anxiety to mean that something bad is going to happen. So the fact that we feel anxious means something bad is going to happen. We forecast something bad in the future, right? But just because we feel anxiety, it doesn't mean that something bad is necessarily going to happen. And our anxiety, again, it is a protective response in some cases. It is just a response, right? It doesn't really forecast anything at all. So that's one way that, kind of that shadow side of the air element can show up in our sort of catastrophizing, anxious forecasting. So let us know in the chat if you have ever felt, like if you've ever noticed yourself catastrophizing. If you want to share what it was about, feel free. You don't have to. You can just let us know that it has happened to you. Another way that the shadow side of the air element can show up is through mind reading. So this is where we assume that we know what the other person is thinking. Now, this can get a little bit tricky for us as kind of empaths and people who actually may have some psychic abilities. So a lot of times what I've noticed with, at least with my own kind of psychic abilities or myself trying to develop them, is that we're usually not able to read other people's thoughts. Now, we might be able to read the situation, we might be able to read their body language and their movements. We might be able to, take what we know about the past and bring it into the future. In fact, we may even have intuitions and inclinations of certain things, but we probably can't read, most of us probably can't read other people's thoughts. So that is a way that we can know that the air element is a little bit on the shadow side for most of us, is when we start being like, oh, I know that he's thinking that about me. That's usually indicating the negative side of the air element. Another thing that can happen to us is black and white thinking. So this is something I see with a lot of my students that I work with, is there's like, and a lot of like extreme language. So they'll use words like always or never. And that can sometimes be an indication to us that the shadow side of the air element is here, or that our air element is a little bit more unbalanced, is when we notice, everything is black and white in our thoughts, or that we're using that really extreme language, like I always do this. Well, do you always do that? Probably not. So tonight is also, I'm working with the air element and getting it more balanced, is to make sure that our language is accurate, whether it's language that we use externally or our internal dialogue as well. And then another way that the air element can show up as being out of balance is in perfectionism. And in particular, perfectionism as safety. So, this idea that if I do everything perfectly, I will be safe. No one will question me, no one will judge me, no one will hate me or dislike me. So that and then oftentimes what that will lead to is because we're so worried about being perfect at doing something. Perfection is something that very few of us can live up to at all times, right? Probably none of us can live up to that at all times, and so that will eventually lead us to procrastination, and so that can sometimes be a cause of our procrastination is that need to be perfect at everything, and then the knowledge that we can't be. We can also have an inner critic that can sound like the truth, and that can be a way that the shadow side of the air element shows up. So this can be tricky as well, because if we're trying to develop our kind of true inner voice, if we're trying to connect to our higher self, which is something that we've been talking about in our Shadow Seekers membership this month, we're trying to trust that voice, but there's also another inner voice, that we have the higher self, we have spirit guides, we have other places we get information, but we also have an inner critic. And that inner critic can be hard to discern that from other voices in our heads, like the more productive ones, like the higher self. But that inner critic can kind of show up, and it can sound like truth. Now, I will tell you kind of the best way to know the difference between the inner critic and your higher self, or a spirit guide for that matter, is that your inner critic tends to be nagging and negative, and it makes you feel bad, as opposed to the higher self and spirit guides. Even when they're telling you something that maybe you don't want to hear, it isn't that nagging, kind of negative voice. So that is to me, that's an easy way that I can tell the difference between the two. So, one of the things I think that is best for us is to sort of reframe what all of this means. So, our thoughts are just our thoughts. That's really important to remember. Just like our emotions are just emotions, they are fluid, they move. Just like emotions tend to be more connected to the water element. Think about the water element, it's very fluid and flowing and moving, right? And it shifts and it changes, and so do our emotions. So, emotions are not facts. The same thing goes with thoughts. Just because we think it doesn't mean it's a fact. Yes, of course, I can think facts like the capital of California is Sacramento. I can certainly think that fact, but I can also think a ton of things that are not facts. And so our thoughts, just like our feelings, are not fact. And just like the water element, the air element is very fluid and moving, and our thoughts shift and change. And so when we really, really internalize that and really understand what that means to us, it means that we absolutely can change our thoughts. And when we change our thoughts, we can change them to be more expansive and open. And again, like I said in the beginning, it's not just about swapping out a negative thought for a positive one and forcing yourself to believe it. It's about having a process to really see the truth and the validity of what we're thinking, or the invalidity of what we're thinking, and then shift it into something that is more accurate. So, a thought can also, here's another thing to kind of internalize, a thought can also be very loud, and that still does not make it true or accurate. Even if it's super loud and it's screaming at you all the time, that itself does not make it accurate. So the goal, like I said, is not to stop thinking, and it's not simply to just think positive. The goal is to change your relationship with your thoughts. And that is really how we balance the air element when it comes to our shadow work. So when it comes to the air element, our shadow work can be about learning how to hear your mind without obeying it. So actually becoming more of a like an observer, which is something that is talked a lot about in Buddhism. So just being able to observe things rather than having to be involved in them. And so if you could step outside of yourself and try to observe your own inner landscape of thoughts, this can help you greatly. Because you start to, you don't have to be so invested in them when you're observing them. You're just simply observing them for what they are. So what is the thought? what is the feeling that comes with it, and does it lead to does it lead to me feeling more positive or negative, or does it lead to me being more productive or less productive? And this is how we can just simply view our thoughts as sort of that outside observer in a more neutral space. And it can help us, it greatly can help us in our shadow work. So I'm about to shift into this 3-step process I have for you. And I really encourage you to get out some paper and do the activity with me. It's very short, it's very simple, and it's one that you can do over and over again. You can teach it to other people because it is so quick and so easy. Before I do that, I'm just going to go to the chat for a moment. So I see Rebecca is also here, Mary Meet. So Samantha said, I have had a vision of 500 years of darkness that is just beginning, and it will be horribly worse before it gets better. Is this catastrophic thinking? So I think that, that's where it can also get tricky. Like when we have visions of things that may or may not come true, is that catastrophic thinking, or is that us having like a prophetic vision? So I don't know that we can necessarily answer that right now. I will tell you that I have not had that same vision, at least that length of time. So, but that doesn't mean that I'm right and you're wrong, or vice versa. But it can. I don't really have a great answer for this question at this time. It can be hard to tell prophetic kind of thinking, prophetic visions from catastrophic thinking. I think that with your catastrophic thinking, I guess here would be like my best advice to try to give the best answer I can, is with catastrophic thinking, a lot of times it's about us. It's about what's going to happen to us. So the example I used earlier, or like you guys know those kind of like mind loops you can get into. I remember when I had unexpectedly found out that my rental home was going to be sold. So this is several years ago, and I had to find a new house to buy, and it was really a difficult thing that I went through when I did that. But there was a lot of catastrophic thinking that happened in that. And so like one thought leads to another, leads to another. We're never going to find a home. We're never going to get a loan. We're never going to make it through escrow. Next thing you know, I'm homeless and on the street. So that to me, that's really the catastrophic thinking. It's much more personal. Um, uh, but yes, I do agree with you, Samantha. I let us hope that that is catastrophic thinking. And I will tell you, to ease your own, like what you're feeling, I have not seen that vision of that length of time. So I hope that helps a little bit. And yes, let's hope that that it is catastrophic thinking for sure. Okay, so well, let's get into the this 3-step process. Okay, so like I said, get out some paper, do this with us, share in the chat. I really think that number one, when there's more in the chat, it feeds the video. That's what the algorithm does. It feeds the video to more people. But also, I really better, more importantly than that, is I think everybody learns from each other. So okay, so let's talk about the core methods here. So the method is it's 3 steps. You identify the thought, you decode what it means, which is basically what's kind of underneath it, and then you shift it. And by shifting it, we don't just replace it with a positive thought, we replace it with something that's more accurate for that moment. So let's start with step 1, or step A. This is identify. So the question is like, what's the script? What is the narrator in your mind saying? What is the thought loop? What is the limiting belief? So I want you to think about one limiting belief that you have that is personal to you, or one thought loop that you've been stuck in lately. Okay, so you may have a lot, but pick one that you feel like you've been in a lot lately. So here are just some examples for anybody who's having trouble. I'm behind, I'm doing it wrong, they're mad at me. So that's one a lot of people will have. It won't work anyway. So that's one that people will kind of say to themselves to keep them from, you know, moving forward. So now remember, your mind will repeat what it thinks will keep you safe. And so it could be in the past that a limiting belief kept you safe, or at that time it was just a thought, and maybe that thought kept you safe, and that reinforced that idea that it would keep you safe. But as it moves on, it moves you further away from your expansion, from your growth, and from what is actually going to keep you safe, right? So what is your most, so tell us in the chat, what is your most prominent negative thought or negative thought loop right now? So what repeats in your mind? So put that in the chat. And then I'm going to tell us about step B, which is what we're going to do once we've determined it. So let me think about one for myself. So I think that one I said earlier about rest really really resonates with me. So it's like if I rest, or if I take time off, then I won't get everything done. So that's kind of on the surface. I'll fall behind. So I really did resonate with that one. But then if I oh, okay, let's not get into the decoding part. So it's just sort of like if I rest, I won't be able to get everything done. Okay, so Tara said, I'll never get a job. Kelly says, I'm always going to be a pain. And notice on that one too, notice on both of them, in fact, they both have that extreme language that usually will point us towards those being limiting beliefs. So Tara's has never in it, and Kelly's has always. So these are really good examples. Joanne said, I need to clean house. Rebecca said, I don't hold enough value. I'm undeserving. And that's a big one for a lot of people too, like our value, right? So these are all really good examples, and they can help other people to also see, like, oh, I have that one too. So keep sharing those. Okay, so and even if you're not sharing, write it down on a piece of paper. And now we're going to move on to the step two. Samantha says, what if I'm wrong? That's one that I worry about too with myself. If I'm just pretending to be what I'm not, and can never be. Okay. So these are all good ones to work with. So keep them coming, but I'm going to move on to step B just so we move a little faster. Cindy says the mastectomy doesn't work. I don't want my family to stress. I'll be okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. So then not sharing it with other people. Yeah, okay, so these are all good ones. These are all good ones to work with here. So the next step B, you're going to decode what it is protecting you from. So this is where you go a little bit deeper. And a few of you may already be getting at this step. Some of you just have sort of like the step A, the surface level, like Tara's, I'll never get a job. Kelly, I'm always going to be a pain. Any of these are great. And so now kind of think about what is it protecting you from? So for example, if somebody had a negative thought of like, I'm always behind, it could, what could be beneath it is if I'm not ahead, then I'll be unsafe. Now, I will tell you, like with mine, here's a couple other examples. So, like, they're mad at me. So, let's say somebody has that limiting belief. People are always mad at me. And so, underneath it, what it could be about, the fear underneath it is if I am disliked, I'll be rejected, or I'll lose my worth. Somebody might think it won't work. So, this could be about something they're going to try. It won't work. So, underneath it, it could be if I don't try, then I can't fail. Right? And so I stay stuck because of that. So I think like beneath my own one is, if I don't rest, I'll fall behind is what I first said. I think what's really underneath it though, is the fear is like, if I don't do enough, if I take some time off, if I rest, then other people will leave. Or, and this is more in my business, or people will, feel like they're not getting enough, or people won't like me, or people will judge me, or so that's where you want to go with like what's underneath it. Now we don't need to know where it comes from in this step-by-step process. It's literally just we're doing it quickly. What's the thought? What could be underneath it? Now remember, most of your limiting beliefs, like I said, are safety strategies. They were meant to kind of protect you at some time, but they have overstayed their welcome, and now they're just leading you to contraction. So you don't necessarily have to share in the chat unless you want to, but definitely write down on a piece of paper, what do you think is actually underneath that limiting belief. That limiting belief is the surface, what's underneath it. And now we're going to shift into step C. So this is turning the absolute into accurate, right? So when we have a limiting belief, we absolutely think it's true, but it's not accurate. And so we want our thought to be more accurate. So we're not, again, swapping out a mantra or swapping in a mantra that we don't believe. That's definitely not what we want to do here, and that's definitely not going to help you. So what we're going to do is we're just going to update the story so that it's more believable to us, and so that it's more accurate for where we actually are. So in order to shift this, we sort of have like kind of three tools, though to me it's just really more like a process that we're going to do. So the first thing you want to do is you want to add a truth word to what's going on. So when I said earlier, there was a couple where someone had said never or always. So those tend to be the word that tends to be language of self beliefs and limiting, or of limiting beliefs and negative beliefs. So we're going to swap in words that are more accurate, like sometimes, right now, in this situation. And that shifts things a lot, because if I say, um, if I rest, I'll fall behind. But if I start to, that's an absolute, right? That is basically saying every time I rest, I will fall behind, or every time I rest, people will leave me, or something like that, or they won't like me anymore, or whatever our limiting beliefs are. But if I change that to like right now, it feels that way. All of a sudden, I've shifted something just literally with one word. I've already shifted that energy in quite a way, really. So add a truth word. Okay, so here would be an example. If you say I always mess up, or you have always in your limiting belief, right now I feel unsure, but I can take the next step. So that's a totally different thought than I always mess up, right? Right now I feel unsure, but I can take the next step. So see if there's a way that especially if you have an absolute word in your limiting belief, see if there's a way that you can change that into sometimes, at this time, in this situation, and just see how that can start to shift the energy. Now, the next thing that we do is we're going to swap out the judgment, because that's the limiting beliefs are our judgment. Essentially, we're going to swap it out for data. I have this coach who is for business coaching, in particular, like selling stuff. And she always says, swap in data, swap out drama. So rather than freaking out, we always go to the data. So so basically, it's making it more accurate. It's making something that you can actually track and see in reality. So instead of saying I'm failing, because there's really no data that we have to definitively say a person is failing or not failing. So instead of having that be our thought, I'm failing, we change it to this is feedback so I can adjust. Right? So if it feels like failure, rather than thinking about something as failure, if we think about it more as feedback, it's data that's coming in, so we can change, so we can make subtle shifts and changes so that we improve it for the future. So see if there's a way that we can shift something. And so, by the way, too, I think actually when I said earlier these are like steps, I think you can like do one or more of these things. So like one thing you can do is change extreme language. That would be like the first thought or the first idea. The second one is, change it so it's something that you can, rather than having this absolute, like I'm always going to fail, or I always fail, or I'm failing, changing it to like I'm inviting in the feedback, or this is feedback so I can improve. So another shift that you could make, if those first two don't really resonate, is you can choose a new operating belief. So this one is probably going to be the most important one for people. So here's a good one for me. Rest is part of my power. And rather than saying rest will make me fall behind, rest is part of my power. Now, that isn't such a rosy, beautiful thought that I have trouble believing it. It's totally right. That is what rest is. It fills up our energy. And animals do it, trees do it, all beings do it, right? Why not me too? So that new operating belief, rest is part of my power, is going to get me a lot further than rest will make me fall behind. Here's another one for a person who's having trouble starting. Clarity comes after I start. So we don't have to know all the answers or the pathway right now. We just need to begin. Here's another one. I can be honest and still be loved. So that would be a good one for people who are worried that if they say what they believe or they say what they need, that others will leave them or judge them. I can be honest and still be loved. So again, it's not creating this unbelievable rosy picture of the future. It's just simply swapping out one very limiting belief for one that is more accurate and one that you can still get behind. So remember, this isn't pretending. You're not just pretending. You're choosing something that is more accurate that you can actually believe. So see if you're able to, do that with your limiting belief. So especially those who put it in the chat. See if there's a way you can shift it in one of those ways, taking out the extreme language, kind of making it more accurate, or looking at it as more like kind of data or feedback, and that can then help you find the next best step. So then we're going to kind of close here this part of the episode with, well, let's make it a little bit more witchier. So after we do that, so after you've kind of come up with, what is your new belief going to be, what could you do next? So a lot of different thoughts. So one thing is, this one's a little bit more mundane, but can have a witchy feel to it too, is to write it down. Write the new operating belief down. So whatever you came up with here, write it down, keep it in your journal, keep it by your computer, put it on a Post-it note on your bathroom mirror, carry it in your wallet, put it somewhere where you will see it. Another thing you can do is then create a sigil around it. So if you want to make it even witchier, you can create a sigil. So you could make just a general sigil like clear mind or true thoughts, which would be way more general. Or you could take that new operating belief that you've come up with to swap out the limiting belief, and you could create a sigil around that. And then you could draw it places where you could see it. You could do a more traditional way to use the sigil would be to draw it and then to burn it. That would be more traditional, or you could carry it with you, or you could write it places. So another thing you can do is do sound too. So I think the sound reset can be really nice. So do one chime or a bell. So put a little bell on your desk or a place where you are. And when you catch yourself in that loop, so inevitably, I am not expecting you, and nor should you expect yourself to just with this one little exercise we did have this all magically fix it all. So you will slip back into the negative beliefs again, but you can do a little sound reset when you do. You can even carry, there's like tiny little bells that you can get at craft shops. You could even carry one in your pocket. And when you notice yourself in that little loop, ring the bell. And it's just sort of bells. When we ring bells in ritual, they note thresholds. So it can kind of note a threshold for you. Like, I caught the limiting belief and loop I'm in. I'm ringing the bell to clear the energy, and now I'm moving forward. And you can ring that bell as many times as you want throughout the day. Another thing you can do is use smoke and incense or scent, because that can carry your intention through space. And so you, as a way to sort of commemorate the new thought that you're creating, you can light some incense, and that sort of helps you tap into the air element. If you're not able to burn incense, you can just open your window, or if you can't do that, you can blow on your hand. It's just a way to kind of bring air into the space to commemorate, the new thought that we're coming up with. So remember, our air work is about shifting us in the moment. And we also want this to be something that is repeatable, that we can do over and over and over again. So that's why the step-by-step process is so simple. And by the way, I am going to make a little cheat sheet of it. And when I send this replay out to the mailing list, I will send you the little cheat sheet so you don't have to remember all of this. It will be in the little cheat sheet. And so, by the way, too, is if you are not on our mailing list, if you're watching this back on YouTube later, you'll be able to, in the description of the video, there's a link where you can get on our mailing list. I'm also going to put this in the chat here live. So there's the link. You can sign up and get on our mailing list, and you will get that. You'll get the replay to this episode as well as that that cheat sheet. So remember, this also is not a one and done ritual. Working with air isn't something we just do and it's over. We don't fix a limiting belief and then have it just be fixed automatically. This is something that you can repeat every time you notice these limiting beliefs coming in. This is a pattern interrupt and a reset that follows it, and you'll be able to use this over and over again. Now, before I move into the, I'm going to go back to the chat, and before I move into the Q&A, what I do want to do is just leave you with a couple of shadow work prompts, if you like that. And this is perfect timing because we're right at the new moon right now. If you're watching this live, this is a good time to be doing your shadow work, or doing a shadow work prompt, though you can do it at any time. So here's a shadow work prompt for you. What topic makes my mind spiral the fastest? What topic makes my mind spiral the fastest? And then adding on to that, what might happen if it didn't spiral? So that's about kind of seeing a different future and a different response. What does my inner critic think it's protecting me from? So that's a different kind of prompt there. What does my inner critic think it's protecting me from? That can help us get into what's beneath the surface. And then here's a final shadow work prompt for you around the air element. What conversation am I avoiding? And what is the cleanest or the clearest thing that I could say? So what conversation am I avoiding, and what is the cleanest or clearest thing I could say? So in summary, I just wanted to recap kind of the 3 steps of the simple method. So the first thing you're doing is you're noticing the loop. So you got to notice it first. What is the thought that's kind of in your way right now? Decode the fear underneath it. That's step 2. Go, what's underneath it? And then step 3, choose the next true statement, and then you can anchor that in with an air practice if you would like. So I hope that helps. I do want to let all Shadow Seekers members know that we will be going in much more in depth in our Shadow Seekers membership when it comes to the shadow side of the air element. So my plan is to kind of expand all of this into bigger workshops for us where we can get in and do the work together. And so you have that to look forward to. And if you're not a member of Shadow Seekers, reach out to me. We're shifting the way that we are enrolling people now, and so I can let you know what it takes to join us. We'd love to have you join us. For those who don't know, Shadow Seekers is our membership where we go in depth into shadow work, energy work, and witchcraft in a small group setting. So reach out to me if that sounds good for you or good to you. And for those of you who are already members, you have some of this more in-depth work to look forward to. So I'm going to shift now into the Q&A. I actually have some good questions that were left for me, but you could certainly put them in the chat here as well. So let me see here if there are any questions I missed. Oh, Samantha said better a buzzer than a bell because buzzers are no, 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 don't you do that. Yeah, I mean, you could do that too. You could totally do that too. I think that the bell, what I mean with the bell is it just changes, like it alerts us to the fact that this is a threshold, so a threshold where we change the thought. But yeah, the buzzer is also like, oh, I have, there's things that people do too where they'll have bracelets and snap themselves when they notice themselves like shifting into more negative thoughts. And it looks like people are putting some really good shifts in here about how they're changing their negative thoughts. So hopefully those of you check out the chat and get some good ideas for that. Okay, so let me shift into some questions so I don't go too over tonight. I'm trying to watch the time here. So I have a question that was left a while back. Let me see. There was a couple from before, and I don't want to miss those. But let me actually start with these are newer ones. So here's a question from Amy, and she had said, "Where do I start?" So when it comes to all of this, shadow work, energy work, and witchcraft, I'm not really sure if she meant which one. I think she meant where do I start with the shadow work. So I think that when it comes to shadow work, it's a big topic. It's a topic that a lot of people talk about. It's a topic that some people teach, and they don't actually know what it really is. And, so there's a lot, I guess where I'm going with this, there's a lot of information out there, and it can be pretty confusing, what to trust, what to believe, and how to find a direction. So I do believe that you need some kind of a direction. Otherwise, you're going to feel like you're just floundering and not really going anywhere. So I already shared this with Amy, but I will share this with the chat as well. So I have created a workshop called How to Do Shadow Work. So, when someone asks me a question, I made this workshop specifically for that very question that I get asked so much, which is how do I start? So in this workshop, I go through the exact method, the exact method that I have used in my own shadow work. It has 8 steps to it, and if you follow it step by step and you kind of take the time to do it, you will be doing shadow work. It's like there's no way a person could watch that workshop, and if they actually started doing that stuff, they would be doing shadow work and energy work. So check out that video. If you're watching back on YouTube, I'm just going to have it down in the comments as well. Check that out. I will let you know that if you're a Shadow Seekers member, that workshop has been turned into a full mini course, which is like 4 or 5 hours of material. It takes you through every step and helps you set it up. And so if you're in Shadow Seekers, check that out if you haven't checked it out. For those who are not in Shadow Seekers, I am planning to sell that course very affordably and in the future, and it'll give people, basically, like I said, expands on the workshop and gives you more steps. But to kind of give you one sort of thing you could do right now if you're trying to get started with shadow work is I think one of the best things a person can do is either notice the things that are triggering them or irking them or irritating them, or take a shadow work prompt, which there's many that you can find. You can just Google online shadow work prompts, pick one that seems to resonate with where you feel you are right now, and then spend some time contemplating that. So either contemplating, the thing that's bothering you, or contemplating that prompt, and spend some time, put that in, and do that cyclically. And if you did that, like, you don't have to always do shadow work at the dark moon, kind of new moon transition. But if you do it, I think it's a good time to do it because then it kind of provides you with a schedule. So I'm always doing it at this time. So if I do nothing else, at least I'm doing my shadow work at this one time per cycle. I think that if you do that and you repeat that over a couple of cycles, you will start to understand what shadow work is more about. It's really about the reflection. It's trying to get to the root of what is going on for you so you can kind of clear out some of these struggles that you have. But, try that simple process and check out that workshop. And I think you'll have a better idea of, what to do next for shadow work. So the next question is from CB, and he asks. So I wanted to go to the page where I had it pulled up so I could read more of it. Let me see, where is it? Here it is. Okay. So CB says, what is your take on the specificity of language and spell work? Some sources are way adamant that the language around your intentions should be as specific as possible, or you risk unpredictable results. Other sources don't seem to put as much emphasis on this. And I know he said he's not really not really advocating one approach or the other, just kind of looking for thoughts on it. So I do encourage other people in the chat to also share, or if you're watching back on YouTube later, share with us. Let me just share some of my thoughts. So, there are types of spell work like let's say we were doing ceremonial magic or something like that. And in ceremonial magic, there's a lot of emphasis on the accuracy of the words. So they must be said exactly a certain way. And then the accuracy of what we're doing. And there's this belief that in ceremonial magic, that if you don't do it right, it can either negate what you're doing or it can actually backfire, in fact. So I am not a ceremonial magician, so I'm not going to speak in detail about that, but I'm just saying that's one example of a place where like language, the accuracy of language would be really important. Where I think language can be important in spell work is when there is a possibility of something happening in a way that you wouldn't want it to happen. So one of the examples I use in our course Demystifying Witchcraft is the example of like a person wants friends and they do a spell for friendship, and then like a bunch of stray cats show up at the house. And while stray cats at your house is awesome, probably some of us already have too many pets, and I don't know what I would do if like a bunch more cats showed up here. So that would be an outcome that isn't really what I would be looking for, and that would be a case where I'd want to be more careful with my language. The same way can be like with work, like or money, for example. So like if I want to do a money spell and I want more money, maybe I want to be careful because I already work 60 hours a week. So I probably want to be careful with my language because I don't want more hours. I need more money. So that kind of tells the universe I'm looking for a different pathway. So that would be where I would just be more careful in my own, like outside of like what ceremonial magicians are doing. That's where I would be more careful in the accuracy of my own language. So I would spend some time first thinking about what are possible outcomes for the spell, and am I going to be okay with all of them? And then if I'm not, then that is when I would try to shift my language and make it more accurate and more specific. Outside of that, I also agree, like part of what CB had said in that question a little bit later on was like, you know, not wanting to be so strict with the language that we close out other options from the universe. And I totally agree with that too. Sometimes one of the things that I will do with my own language in my spell work is to say like, this is the way I would like it, but I'm open to other possibilities. So if you are open to other possibilities, that can be a good kind of thing to say in the spell that sort of gives the universe the space to fulfill what it is in the way that it wants to, or the way that seems like most aligned to what you need. But also it gets your desire out into the universe first and says, this is the way I would like it to happen, but I also am open to other possibilities. So that's kind of like my take on using language like that in spell work. But I would love to see too, like we'd love to see what other people have to say as well. Um, Let me see here. Tom was asking for some rituals to help with self-relaxation, healing, and rest. So I think what I had told him is I think one of the best rituals that you can do at night is to do a ritual where you imagine yourself kind of cutting cords that are attached to you that you may have picked up through the day, especially if you're very empathic and sensitive to energy. And just take a few moments at night to close your eyes and imagine yourself just kind of cutting those cords so that you can go to sleep without all everybody else's energy. As far as rituals to kind of help with self-relaxation, I think that Friday is like the day of love, right? So it's a good day for self-love. So do a nice spell for you, maybe even working with a love goddess. Like I love working with Venus and Aphrodite on Fridays and working with them. Just taking that time out to do something loving for yourself, like a self massage of your neck, right? Can just, it can feel mundane, but it can just open up so much because you took the time and the care for yourself to relax in those moments. To me, it just opens up like a doorway to more of that same kind of energy coming to you. So I hope that helps. I think that was all the questions that I had tonight. So let me just see if there's anything in the chat that I have missed. Andrea is saying that the workshop was amazing, that how to do shadow work. She highly recommends it. Joanne said, I would like to learn about spell structure. So spell structure, by that you mean like how to write a spell. So we definitely talk. There's a whole several modules in on that in our Demystifying Witchcraft course. Um, I could get into that probably in a future episode. It would just take a little bit longer than I have to answer that question. But I think, like, briefly, when it comes to spell structure, I think it's important to think about your intentions. You got to have an intention first. I like to think about what are the possible outcomes of the intention. I like to do some divination around it before, just to kind of see like what will happen if I do the spell versus not do the spell. And then from there, you want to kind of figure out the modality of the spell. So it's like, what kind of spell do you want to do? Is it candle magic? Is it sigil magic? Is it herbal magic? So you kind of figure out the carrier or the catalyst. And then from there, you decide if you want to have words and a chant. You don't have to. Some spells can just be internally like that. And then you usually will need some way to raise energy. So you can raise a cone of power. You can rub your nail beds together. You can rub your hands together. You can do some movement or dancing or chanting or drumming. And that all will raise the energy. And then you have the catalyst, you're doing the spell, you raise the energy, and then you send that out into the universe. And then usually I would recommend then you let it rest. But you could always repeat it at another time, at a different in a future cycle, if it feels like it's a big working that could use that repetition being repeated several more times. So hopefully that helps with like a kind of a way to structure a spell. But if you do want to get in more in depth in that, we do have that in several modules in our Demystifying Witchcraft course that goes into the timing and everything like that as well. Um, all right, so I am going to end now, but I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope it helps you kind of understand how to sort of work with the shadow side of the air element. Now, don't forget to sign up for our mailing list if you're not already on it. That way you won't miss a future episode. You can also subscribe to our Body Mind Witchcraft YouTube channel, and then you'll get reminders as well, so you won't miss the future episodes because we upload all of these later to that in replay. And don't forget to leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in this video. This helps us get this out to more viewers. And coming up next week, we're going to be talking about the fire element. We'll be starting, though, with correspondences and practices. And then the following week, we'll be talking about the shadow side of the fire element. All right. Until next time, blessed be.